You know, Hamza, a lot of people on both the political right and the political left, the libertarians and the socialists, tend to think of the problem as a problem involving two poles or two parties, the individual and the state. And the question is how much authority should be in the individual and how much authority should be in the state. And obviously the socialists want to tip things in the direction of more authority for the state. The libertarians want to tip things in favor of more authority for the individual. But I've always thought that that misrepresents the question from the beginning and just results in a distorted analysis, because really there are three poles or three parties. There is the individual, of course, there is the state, but then also there's the institutions of civil society.
Right.
Beginning with the family, the religious community,
The mosque.
the local civic association. Yes, the mosque, the synagogue, the temple, the church, the private associations of every description that have to bear in any decent society the lion's share of the burden of providing health, education, and welfare, including to those who are in need. And even with those who are not in need, the institutions that have to play the primary role in bringing up children and transmitting to each new generation the virtues, the habits of heart and mind that enable people to lead successful lives and be good citizens. But the institutions of civil society vanish in the analysis of both the libertarians and the socialists. The socialists will simply have the state take over the role of the family or the mosque or church or synagogue or the civic association, or they'll commandeer those institutions of civil society into the service of the instrumentalities of the state, take them over. And of course, the libertarians just miss the institutions of civil society altogether, and they just want to make sure that the state does not oppress the individual. But I think it falls to us, especially religious people who live our lives in those institutions of civil society. These are our primary homes, even more primary than the nation we belong to, for example. We can be good, loyal, patriotic citizens, but you know, as a Muslim, I know as a Christian that our first allegiance is to God, and therefore our very first allegiance is to our religious community, and that shouldn't scandalize anybody. I want that to be the case. I want my fellow Christians to be Christians first, Americans second, because I think if they're good Christians, they will be good Americans. I want my Muslim friends to be Muslim first. I know this scandalizes a lot of Christians. They should be Muslims first and Americans second. And if they're good Muslims, they'll be good Americans. And same for Jews. So I think we need to be in the forefront of reminding everyone, our libertarian friends and our socialist friends, that if we're going to serve the poor, if we're going to serve the young, if we're going to serve the people who are most in need of the delivery of health, education, and welfare, the primary role has got to be played by the institutions of civil society. So I would much rather see the wealthy fulfill their obligations to the needy, operating primarily, not exclusively, but primarily through the charities of institutions of faith and other institutions of civil society, and only secondarily through the government and the tax system. I think it's, in the Catholic tradition, we call that the doctrine of subsidiarity. Letting the institutions closest to those we are serving have the resources and have the authority to meet the needs. The distant government doesn't know anybody by name. It doesn't know your children by name. It doesn't know my children by name. It doesn't know the person who finds himself addicted to drugs or the person who is mentally disabled. It doesn't know the person by name. But the local religious institution who reaches out to serve those people know the individuals by name. And by name here, I'm using that as a metaphor. They know their particular needs, the circumstances, why they're in the position that they're in, what can be done to help, what has been tried before, what has failed, what might work this time, how do we deal with people. That's why those institutions of civil society are so important, and we've got to get our fellow Americans. This is a very wealthy, prosperous country. There's going to be a lot of money available to help people, but we could blow it or continue to blow it unless we rejuvenate, renew, revive, reinvigorate the institutions of civil society.
Well, and how, that gets to another problem, which is the bowling alone phenomenon. Putnam's argument about what's happened in 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 America with the loss of these organizations. I mean, so many of these institutions are derelict in a lot of ways. They're neglected, and you and I think, would both agree that government is not very effective at dealing. The amount of money that government has put into addressing the poverty issue, I mean, we're looking at trillions of dollars.
That's right, Tom said, trillions of dollars.
It's overwhelmingly beyond belief how ineffectual they have been.
I grew up in the heart of Appalachia. I grew up in the hills of West Virginia. And although my father was poor growing up, I never faced poverty. I never lived in poverty. But I lived around a lot of poor people. They were my classmates, and they were my friends. They were my father's friends, my family's friends. And this was at the time when the Great Society programs were being launched. And it was a time of great excitement and enthusiasm because we all knew that the situation economically in Appalachia was bad. And reforms were needed. And we at first had a great deal of hope that the government coming in with huge influxes of money would make a great positive difference and help to get people back up on their feet. But I very quickly saw, even as a young man, that the programs were not only failing very often and very rarely succeeding, but worse than failing, they were counterproductive. They were having negative effects on the very people they were designed to help. And that helped to put me on a path to a different kind of view about politics. I used to be much more favorable toward large governmental programs to solve large social problems. But when I saw, as a young man, the failures, the futility, the counterproductive results of these programs, that's when I began to see that we've got to reinvigorate and work through the institutions of civil society.
Although, one of the things about the Muslim community in the United States, which is a very dynamic community, they have been able to build mosques all over the country, and largely because they have to rely on themselves. So, in Muslim countries where the state really is the regulator of religion, because that's absent here, there's a lot more, I think, energy in the religious community. Like, I've seen how the state intervention in religion kind of kills, it deracinates something very, very important in religion. That idea of self-reliance, which is so fundamentally American, right back to Emerson. It's just something that I think is a hallmark of the American experiment.